Cocktail and side tables are one of my favorite ways to add a big design punch without spending a lot of money. It's a fun area to kind of have like a wilder side on the design.
For this project, we have two found objects that normally would have wound up in the trash. There's two globes that we're gonna give a paper mache treatment to that'll give us that textured plaster look, but it's on a budget and it's recycling and upcycling. So I found these globes in the thrift store. Keith had an idea of how we can repurpose it into a cool table. So I have never actually paper mache'd anything in my life, so Keith will be teaching me how it's done.
Paper mache is one of my favorite things. It's super easy, it has a beautiful texture to it, it's very warm, and it's just fun to get kind of messy with it.
So the first step is to break these globes down to separate the two halves.
Cut the globe in half at the equator. So obviously you have to get in there, and it's a paper that's compressed, so use a little bit of force, but once you get in there, it should cut pretty nicely.
And I'm gonna leave mine intact, so I'm just gonna undo the base, but leave the globe as a sphere.
There we go. The base of the table is actually gonna be a pre-cut circular piece of wood. What we're gonna do is actually run a dowel from the bottom to the top to create your base and your tabletop. And then what you'll do is stack the globes in succession. And then we'll paper mache the entire thing to create a unified look and paint it.
So I guess the first step would be to drill the dowel hole through the globes.
Yep.
So we're gonna use 1¼ inch spade bit for our inch dowel.
Next step is just to actually mix the flour and the water for the paper mache, and we'll get them coated. It's usually about half and half. Half water, half flour. Mix it to a very smooth consistency, and that creates the glue for the paper. This is how my mother made gravy. Nice, smooth, consistent. I use newspaper. You can use tissue paper. You can use just about anything you want.
I think the classic is newspaper, right?
Well, I don't know if that's classic French style. They probably use some fancy paper or something.
So was it French?
Yeah, papier mâché.
Okay. So how do you do this?
I like a nice 3 to 4 inch piece. If you get too long, it gets harder to kind of create that nice texture. So we're gonna do several layers of the paper mache. The first one, again, you wanna make sure it's nice and adhered to the globe. The second ones, you can get a little more crazy with the texture. Every now and then you'll notice that on your paper mache, a lot of moisture is gonna build up, a lot of water, glue. That's okay. Sometimes it's nice to throw in a drier piece of paper to help absorb some of that.
So this one's done. We'll let this dry and we can move on to the other hemisphere and this whole sphere.
I love looking through design websites, design magazines to try to find pieces that I think we can replicate. This plastered furniture thing that's going on right now is so fun. I love this trend. The texture is amazing, but plastered furniture is wildly expensive. But I think one of my biggest inspirations is taking a really big high-end look and figure out a way to make them affordable, make them doable for, an average Joe. Coming back for layer 2, you wanna make sure that everything is nice and dry. We're gonna try to build in a little more texture on this layer. Lay it down, make sure it's all squished out nice and flat. And then you're just gonna kind of use your fingers to push it up, kind of seal the edges, but it'll create some really fun little folds. And when you paint it, it'll give little places for the paint to hold on to a little thicker and thinner, which makes even more texture. First layer is nice and smooth, tight to the surface. After that, every layer can have crinkles.
So you're already starting to see the little crevices and that kind of natural looking texture of like a stone.
We've got a nice second layer. You can stop here or you can add more layers if you want more texture. Overall, it's got a nice crinkle. I love it. I'm gonna let it dry. So our paper mache is finally dry. Everything looks good. I love the texture on it. Next steps, we're actually gonna assemble our little table. These are 15 inches pre-cut wood circles. You can find these at just about any hardware store. This is a 1-inch dowel, also available at a hardware store. This is 23 and a half. Thank you. 23 and a half, and we'll talk about why on that in just a second. To be able to get the dowel in the right place, what we're gonna do is measure center, measure from multiple spots around and just keep marking. There's really the most efficient way to get center on a circle.
So you're gonna start the screws before you put the dowels in.
Yep, you want the sharp side sticking out on the other side so you'll be able to actually kind of attach the dowel to it. Otherwise, trying to line it up, very, very tricky. If it's not perfectly lined up, it's not gonna make a huge difference, so don't stress too much about this, but do try to get it centered. Nice.
So you wanna sink it, and sinking it means that the head of the screw is embedded in the wood, so that'll pull this dowel really tight.
So next is the fun part. We'll slide all of our pieces in place. Part of keeping all the globes in place is to use just compression. These are 12-inch diameter globes, so obviously your full height is about 24. Cutting the dowel just about a ½ inch shorter will keep that lid nice and tight and keep everything from kind of moving around.
All right, that looks good.
Looks good to me.
Now it's all nice and tight because it's been compressed.
To finish it out, what we're gonna do is put more paper mache on the wood.
So that black line there along the seam is kind of ugly. So if you just take the paper mache all the way down, then you can cover it and it'll look completely seamless.
It's the seamless quality, I feel like, that really takes it to the next level on the design. So it doesn't feel DIY. The end table and living room design to me is kind of that little cherry on top. It's like, find me something fabulous and different, and I want to talk about my cocktail table. I don't want to just have a cocktail, you know? Like, tell me about the table I'm drinking on. It's so fun.
So that's the first layer.
Yep. Again, if you want to add more layers on this little bottom part, I wouldn't do a ton of layers on top. The texture is really kind of not what you're after at the very top. You want kind of a smoother surface to be able to set stuff on. All we gotta do is let it dry and we can paint it and it is done. I think a cocktail table or a side table is a really, really great space to add a little fun detail because it's not terribly large. This particular table really kind of encompasses a lot of things that I love about design. You can have texture, you can have fun shapes, and you can have purpose. These little side tables can be really wild and really funky and really bring in a fun pop of design. Our table is totally dry at this point. Everything looks nice. We're gonna spray paint it. And after that, we're gonna put a clear coat on it and it'll be ready to use.
So we're using a matte white spray paint, and then we'll also use a matte clear polyurethane.
The main point of this is to kind of have that natural stone looking element to it. So if it's shiny, that kind of kills that vibe a little bit.
Polyurethane will seal the paint and seal the paper mache to protect it. If you were to put a drink on top of it, if the drink sweats, it gives you a protective layer so that you don't ruin the paint or the paper mache.
It's really cool to see this come together because these globes probably would have been thrown away. And now we have this really cool, like, textural element to add to the space, and it really wasn't that hard to do. It's really great to see something kind of upcycled and reused in a creative way. Keeps it out of the trash, and we have a really great table for the space now.
We tried to replicate kind of like a stone, hefty looking object. With that simple white paint, I think it kind of takes it there with that texture, and it's neutral enough to pretty much work in any space.
Gives you something kind of fun to look at too in the shape, and all of the geometric patterns are kind of repeated throughout the whole design now.
This project is actually pretty simple. It just takes a little bit of drying time. You could do it over a weekend and you end up with a really great table.